good morning student. Today I am going to demonstrate you the interior of the skull, that is the base of the skull from inside, which is also known as the norma basalis interna. Okay, when we remove the skull cap, then we expose the base of the skull. Okay, so this is the base of the skull, which is usually studied with the help of its three divisions. That means we divide the norma basalis interna or the base of the skull from inside into three parts, okay, for the convenience of description only. An anterior part, then it is the middle part, and then it is the posterior part. So this will be the anterior part, then this will be the middle part of the skull base, and this is the posterior part of the base of the skull. Okay, just you see this very interesting finding here in the skull cap. As we remove the skull cap, here you are seeing a suture which is not present. Okay, this is an adult skull, and this is the metopic suture. Okay, that means the right and left frontal bone which should unite between the age of 6 to 8 years. Okay, they have not united. So you are getting here the frontal bone into two different pieces. Okay, two different. Anyway, let us come to the this interior of the base of the skull, and I have to said you that it is the anterior, middle, and the posterior part of the base of the skull. In this video, we will learn about the anterior part of the base of the skull. Okay, so this we will only confine in this video. Okay, and I will tell you only about the detailed structure of the anterior part of the base. Okay, now what are the bones which forms the anterior part of the base? This is the frontal bone. Okay, it is the frontal bone which forms on either side, right side and the left side. See this? This is the frontal bone, and this base is also formed by the frontal bone of the, frontal bone, and in the median plane it is formed by the ethmoid bone. Okay, it is formed by the cribriform plate of ethmoid. You can see that there is a cribriform plate or the plate with showing the various minute foraminas, and this is called as the cribriform plate of the ethmoid. Okay, and then the third bone which will take part in formation of the base of the skull is in the anterior part is the lesser wing of the sphenoid. Okay, it will be the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone. Okay, now let us see the sutures which are present in these three different bones. Okay, which three different bones? Frontal bone on the right and the left side. Okay, and then the cribriform plate of the ethmoid, and posteriorly the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and in midline it is the anteriormost part of the body of the sphenoid. So in the midline it is the body, and on lateral side it is the lesser wing of the sphenoid. Let us see the sutures which are seen here. Okay, what sutures we see here between these bones? The sutures are frontoethmoid. That means there is a suture between the frontal bone and the cribriform plate of the ethmoid. So that suture is called as the frontoethmoid suture. Then it is the fronto-sphenoidal suture. That is the suture between the frontal bone, frontal bone and the sphenoid bone. So that is called as the fronto-sphenoidal. See this suture if you can see. Let me bring it close to it. Camera. This is the frontal bone and this is the sphenoid. So this suture if you can see, this is the frontoethmoidal suture is seen here. Okay, so this is the frontoethmoidal suture, and then the third suture is the sphenoethmoidal. Okay, that is suture between the cribriform plate of the ethmoid and the sphenoid is sphenoethmoidal. So there is a frontoethmoidal and then there is a sphenoethmoidal suture is seen here. Right. So these are the sutures which are seen in the bone, that in the anterior part of the base of the skull. Okay. Now coming to the boundaries. Okay. This is bounded anteriorly and laterally by the frontal bone. See this? The whole thing is frontal bone. Here, here, here. This whole thing is the frontal bone. So anteriorly as well as on lateral side, most of it part, it is bounded by the frontal bone. Okay. Now posteriorly, it is bounded by the posterior border of the lesser wing of the sphenoid. See here, this is the posterior border of the lesser wing of the sphenoid, which is bounding the anterior part of the norma basalis externa. So this is the posterior border of the lesser wing. If you trace the posterior border of lesser wing of the sphenoid on right and the left side, on both the side, it will end in a bony projection, and this bony projection is called as anterior clinoid process. This is called as anterior clinoid process. Then after this, then you trace it still further, okay, forward, and then you will see that this is bounded by the body of the sphenoid. As I said, in the median part, it is the anteriormost part of the body of the sphenoid is here. So it is after the anterior clinoid process on right, this anterior border is formed by a groove, okay, the anterior border of a sulcus. This sulcus is not the part of the anterior part of the base, but its anterior margin of this sulcus, it is the boundary, and this sulcus is called as sulcus chiasmaticus. Okay, sulcus chiasma. So this is the anterior margin or anterior boundary of the sulcus chiasmaticus. Okay, so this is the posterior boundary. So what were the boundaries? Anteriorly and laterally, it is on either side, it is bounded by frontal bone. Posteriorly, it is bounded by lesser wing of the sphenoid, and then it is the anterior clinoid processes on right and left side, and then it is the anterior margin of the sulcus chiasmaticus, which forms the posterior boundary, okay, of the anterior part of the base of the skull. Let us come to the floor after boundary. Okay, this in the median region, the floor is formed by the cribriform plate of the ethmoid. It is formed by the cribriform plate of the ethmoid, and then this area, which I said is the part of the body, anteriormost part of the body of the sphenoid, it is called as jugum sphenoidale. Jugum sphenoidale. So there is a cribriform plate of ethmoid, and then this flat surface area here in midline, it is called as the jugum sphenoidale. And in the lateral region, the floor is formed by the orbital plate of the frontal bone. Orbital. Anteriorly, this is orbital plate of the frontal bone, and posteriorly, it is the lesser wing of the sphenoid, okay, which is extending laterally from the jugum sphenoidale, okay. And here we had seen the suture between the lesser wing of the sphenoid and the orbital plate or the frontal bone, okay, fronto-sphenoidal suture, okay, that was the fronto-sphenoidal suture. Right. So we have seen in the median region. Let us see we have seen the median region and of the floor and the lateral region. Let us come to the detail of the median region. There is in the median region, if you start in the floor, most anteriorly there is a bony ridge is seen. Okay, and this bony ridge here is called as the frontal crest. Okay, it is called as frontal crest. If it is not seen in this skull, I will show you a better skull here where frontal crest is seen much better way. See this frontal crest? Okay, it is a elevated sharp ridge of the bone that is called as frontal crest. And then if you trace posterior to the frontal crest, then you will see a foramina here. See this foramina? And most of the time this foramina is blind. that means if you will pass a probe of the wire inside this foramina, it will not go. That means most of the time it is blind, and hence it is called as foramina cecum. It is called as foramina cecum. But when it is patent, it will give passage to an emissary vein, okay, which may join to the mucous membrane, okay, of the frontal air sinus also, okay, frontal air. So this is the foramina cecum. After the foramina cecum, what you will see is a projection of the bone coming out in midline from the cribriform plate of the ethmoid, okay, it is the cribriform plate of the ethmoid. And then this cribriform plate of the ethmoid is a bony projection which is having a sharp anterior edge, and through this attach is the anterior end of the falx cerebri, which is the fold of the dura mater, okay, it is the fold of the dura mater. Now, anterior in the cribriform plate, there you will see anterior and posterior ethmoidal foramina. I am trying to locate anterior and posterior ethmoidal foramina. Most of the time this cribriform plate of the ethmoid is a broken plate, okay, it is a broken plate, and by the side of the cribriform plate of the ethmoid there will be an anterior ethmoidal foramina, and most posteriorly this is the posterior ethmoidal foramina is here. I can see the posterior here also in this specimen, as well as in that specimen I have also seen, but the anterior is because this cribriform plate itself is a broken structure here in both the case. I cannot show you the anterior ethmoidal canal. These are the openings of the anterior and posterior ethmoidal canal on right side as well as on the left side of the cribriform plate, okay. Now through this anterior and posterior ethmoidal canal, through the anterior ethmoidal canal, there passes the anterior ethmoidal nerve and vessel. But through the posterior ethmoidal canal, only the ethmoidal vessels they pass, okay, only the ethmoidal vessels they pass. Now, coming to the lateral area of the floor, here you can see this is the orbital plate, okay, and this orbital plate of the frontal bone here lies the frontal lobe of the brain, and the gyri and sulci, they are just causing their impression. So these depressions and elevations which are seen on this orbital plate of the frontal bone, they are because of the gyrus of the frontal lobe, okay, frontal lobe. And then if you go posteriorly, it is the lesser wing of the spheni. You just see clearly, this is the suture here between the ethmoid and between the orbital plate of the frontal bone, and this is the anterior margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid. This flat bone is jugum sphenoidal. Here anterior margin of the sulcus chiasmaticus, okay, anterior margin of the sulcus chiasmaticus is here. So this is the the floor of the anterior cranial fossa. It is the floor of the anterior cranial fossa. This completes the anterior part of the floor of the cranial fossa. Then we will go in the next video the middle part of the cranial fossa, okay, middle part. Thank you very much for watching this video.